We sing these songs and say and read these scriptures in church about I surrender. I surrender, Lord, all to Jesus I surrender. All to thee I freely give. But when this happened,
The
there
hell
was
was surrendering.
no, I didn't mean that. When I said I submit, I surrender all, it was like all but this, not this.
Yes. Yeah. 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 So, again, if we're going to go scriptural, this business of taking up your cross,
Oh,
yeah, we like to make that into some kind of heroic martyrdom, but it's really squeezing through this very narrow gate that a camel can't get through
yeah, yeah,
to give up the things that we thought we could not live without. And the things we think we cannot live without are almost all transient things in this world,
yeah.
because there is nothing that we love that we get to keep.
Welcome to Get Real with Alexis Jones. On this podcast, we'll dive into real relationships with real people guided by the wisdom and perspective of some of the most seasoned voices in our community, our beloved seniors. Each week, we'll unpack the joys, challenges, and lessons learned about love, family, friendship, and everything in between. This is a space for heartfelt conversations, eye-opening truths, and powerful stories that will inspire and challenge the way you think about relationships. We're keeping it honest, unfiltered, and deeply meaningful. So settle in and let's get ready to get real. Let's jump in. Hello and welcome to this episode of Get Real with Alexis. I am Alexis Jones and I am your host for today. I try to have conversations that are authentic and honest in hopes that this will be a benefit to you, our listeners. Today, I'm really happy to have my friend Vernon Grambling with me. Vernon is an ordained Presbyterian minister for almost 54 years. He worked as a chaplain on the oncology unit at Grady, and he helped to begin one of the earliest hospices in the country. Later, he helped write the Medicare law, which gave hospice formal standing. For the last 40 years, Vernon has provided pastoral care and counseling in private practice. Currently, Vernon is associated with the Decatur Presbyterian Church as a parish associate and running an ongoing grief group. This is where I met Vernon. In fact, he is the facilitator for the group that I attend. So I am happy to welcome my friend Vernon Grambling. Welcome, Vernon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. So, as many of you know, if you've been listening to any of the podcasts, I lost my son Herman on January 10th of this year. That was 3 months ago. And I started this journey of trying to understand how to navigate this grief. And as I started attending this group at Decatur Presbyterian where I met Vernon, and I found his insight to be so helpful to me in my journey. So, one of the things that happened to me when my son passed, I expected the sadness, I expected the feelings of depression. I expected low energy. I expected all those things that accompany sadness. What I didn't expect and what surprised me was my anger. So today, I want to talk about a lot of things, but I want to start our focus with this topic of anger, Vernon, because when that hit me, I really thought I was going crazy. What in the world is happening to me? So I want to talk about anger. I've got some questions here Well, let me just start here. Can you talk about grief and anger and why is it that anger is a part of grief? What am I angry about? I can tell you, but I guess I want your insight about why that's one of the feelings, one of the emotions we experience when we're going through grief.
Okay. Well, a couple things. Well, a lot of the way I think and the way I try to describe things is nonlinear. And when I am encountering people, especially in an ongoing group, I imagine it as dropping drops of color on a canvas. And after a while, they form a pattern. And so a lot of times we come at things from all different directions, but hopefully each is another drop of color.
Mhm.
And when we talk about anger, uh, one of the things that I have discovered, and I think this is clinically sound, that anger is a secondary, not a primary emotion. It looks primary because it's so visceral and charged, but it's usually a way to cope with helplessness.
Mm,
And if you pay attention to when you're angry, what is it that I can't control? What is it that I can't manage? What is the gap between what should be and what is? You'll probably find where you're helpless. You'll find that all of your best efforts are not sufficient
yes,
to manage the situation.
yes,
And what's worse is all the assumptions you made about what you could count on are being altered. It's very disorienting, and it's very common just to get angry about that. That's not right. It shouldn't be. Now, as I often say, that and $5 will get you a cup of coffee.
you you touched on something and you said this in class, I think in our group rather, the last time we met. You mentioned this feeling of helplessness. That was very eye-opening for me because I thought about I am helpless. I cannot bring my son back.
Right? No matter what you do.
I will not hear him play his viola again.
Mhm.
I cannot text him or call him or or wait for him to say on a text, "Hey mom, I'll call you later. I'm busy," which is what he always used to tell me. And I was telling you, I had these feelings like I'm at the grocery store and I'm watching people shop. And I'm like, what? Why are you all grocery shopping?
Yeah,
Don't you know that Herman is gone?
yeah, yeah.
I was like, everybody stop and go home.
Mhm,
And why is it? And Vernon, let me share something with you that I hate to say out loud.
mhm,
Why is it that it's my son and not that son or their son?
mhm.
Why was it Herman? And how can I celebrate your son when my son is no longer here? All of that, all of that.
So here's a drop of color. In the Middle Ages, the theologians thought that the earth was the center of the universe. It is a feeling that we've had through all of our lives that what matters most is what we know and what we see. And when we're in that orientation, losing someone we love tears apart the fabric of how we see the world. Now, it doesn't matter that our way we see the world is profoundly egocentric. Uh, it's the way we see the world. And so when you talk about Herman, all of the ways that you knew him in this world are gone to you. And it forces you to find, and grief forces you to confront, how is Herman still with you? because you don't get him the way you knew him.
Hmm.
And the way you knew him was the only way you knew him.
Right.
And that's a very, very painful juxtaposition. And it challenges our whole life. I'm writing now about grief in a chapter, and it's titled Grief, the Beginning of New Life. Now, that doesn't mean you like that new life.
Hmm.
That's another story, but nobody asks your opinion.
For sure.
It's you now are required to view life differently than you ever did before. And especially bright and competent people hate that
Yeah.
because we are used to having the world organized in predictable and fair ways, which is really hubris. And to
Yes.
say why Herman is the most gut wrenching question you can ask, but the question that most people are not ready to hear is why not Herman?
Yes.
And we don't want to ask, no, 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 no. That's my Herman.
Mm-mm.
Uh,
No, I've asked a lot of questions, not that one. Don't know if I'll ever be able to ask that question. I've asked why or woulda, coulda, shoulda, all of that, but not why not.
well, and the it's an important question, and we resist it because that places us in a world where we are creatures. All creatures die. And we all know that's true, but when it happens to us, either to us personally or to anybody we love,
Hmm.
that is not right. Our whole biology screams no.
Yes.
And but that no is an insistence that the world be on our terms, and it is not.
Oh, it's so true. You know, we sing these songs and say and read these scriptures in church about I surrender, Lord, all to Jesus I surrender, all to thee I freely give. But when this happened,
The
there
hell
was
with
no,
surrendering.
no, I didn't mean that. When I said I surrender all, it was like all but this, not this.
Yes. Yeah. 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 So, again, if we're going to go scriptural, this business of taking up your cross,
Oh,
yeah, we like to make that into some kind of heroic martyrdom, but it's really squeezing through this very narrow gate that a camel can't get through
yeah, yeah,
to give up the things that we thought we could not live without. And the things we think we cannot live without are almost all transient things in this world
yeah.
because there is nothing that we love that we get to keep.
Wait a minute.
Yeah,
There's
that's a bad word.
nothing that we love that we get to keep.
Right. That includes our possessions. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
But it also includes the people in our very lives. So this is helplessness, and part of our creation is that we are less than God, which means we are very mortal, very flawed, and our bodies and the people around us are going to break down and we will lose them one by one. Now, who
And
wants
that
to
is
know that?
and I lost my mom. That was devastating. And I remember the anger.
Mhm.
I remember she had, she had a stroke, she had cancer, colon cancer. And, I'd go to the hospital each day in hopes that she was going to get better.
Yes,
In
sure.
fact, the doctor was trying to tell me that she was not going to get better.
Mhm.
That is not what I heard.
Alexis, my dearest friend uh, is a woman I've run with, I guess it's over 35 years now. And when her husband Uh, it's a long story, but was with her in the ER when they were trying to resuscitate him. They tried like 7 times, and they actually did. And in the middle of that, the ER doc did something I had never seen before. He did two things. One is he stopped the code and he told everyone, stop what you're doing. Is there anything else you can think we need to do? Now, to collaborate that with other people in the middle of that kind of intensity
Yeah,
is very rare. And he went to
absolutely.
Barbara, my friend, and said to her, your husband is the sickest man in this hospital.
Wow.
And we're going to do our best, but you need to know your husband is the sickest man in this hospital. She didn't hear him. And I was impressed with his clarity, his kindness.
Yes.
They resuscitated him. They finally got him upstairs, where he arrested on the way upstairs, and but he was in a room, and everything had calmed down, and it looked like he was going to make it through the night, and that's all she could see. And Barbara's not one that accepts help well, and so she was shooing me out of the hospital, because I'd been with her for hours,
Mhm.
and I left. You can stand vigil just so long, and the end of the story is that he died 2 or 3 hours later. And but the even in the face of watching these multiple attempts and then being told with words,
Yeah.
this man is way too sick. She held on, and I held on to it. I went home. I knew kind of, but I didn't know. And I mean, this idea of always being present with a person when they die is actually fairly rare.
Yeah.
I mean, you can be sitting in the room and get up and go to the bathroom and come back and find them gone.
Right.
These things are out of our control. And so we make these little deals. Well, if he's got to suffer, at least relieve him of the hiccups.
Mm.
One man hiccuped for 3 days. His wife had to go to a closet as far away from him as she could get in the house and close the door and say, Lord, why can't you at least let him die in peace?
Yeah.
And so we have couldn't we at least, which is just variations of the
This is
question,
so true.
why Herman?
Yeah. And can't you at least do this? He could have at least come home with me. If he had come home with me, I would have noticed he was in distress and I could
Yes.
have called for help. At
And
least
that's
you could
humorous.
have, at least you could have, and so I'm learning through our grief support that all this is a part of grieving. But one thing you said, well, I want to say a couple of things.
Mhm.
What someone asked me yesterday, oh, my best friend, we were talking last night when I was telling her we were going to talk about grief and anger. She said, well,
Mhm.
are you still angry? And I said, maybe not to the same extent, but
Uh-huh.
yes, I'm
Sure.
still angry.
Mhm.
I'm still angry that I was the one who lost my son.
Yeah.
And I'm still angry that he didn't talk to me and tell me what was going on.
Mhm.
And I'm angry that, you know, other family members who knew didn't do whatever it is I think
What
they
we're
should
supposed
have
to do.
done.
You bet.
And so I'm still angry about those things, but I will say that I don't know if it's as intense as it was
Mhm.
near the beginning.
Yeah.
One thing you said in our group, and I wrote down some of your quote. I have some quotes here from you, and I'll start with this one. The way out is through the bottom.
Yep.
Can you explain?
Okay. there is no escaping the raw pain of having, first of all, losing somebody and having your entire world altered. That is wrenching. I say I don't surrender. My fingers are ripped from the bar and that I'm holding on to. And but ultimately that is all we can do. And there's an odd paradox. I don't paradox might be the wrong word. We can live our fullest life when we live within what we are.
Mhm.
And when we face that what we are is not something we wish for, what we are is a creature who cannot control outcomes, who have all kind of fantasies about being able to outwork pain and outwork life because that's how we were raised, for crying out loud. And it's only part of life. So I tell this story and as often as I can. When my daughter was about 3 or 4, she asked me for some candy before dinner. And I said, "No, sweetheart." And she said, "But Daddy," I said, "please." And I said, "Yes, you did. You were very polite. But please just gives you a better chance. It doesn't guarantee anything." And I'm sure my little 3-year-old didn't quite get that, but in real life, we say, well, I did this and I did that, and if I'd been there, this could have, and all of that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
all those things just change the odds. They don't guarantee a damn thing.
Yes. Mhm.
And so we don't want to live with that line between the obligation to do everything we can do and the realization that everything we can do will not be enough.
So when do we can't how do we can we prepare better for loss? Or is it you really can't prepare, you just have to face it and try to find out how to navigate it when it happens?
So another Vernon analogy here. If you need to change a tire on a car and you have never driven or seen a car, you're probably smart enough to figure it out.
Mhm.
You'll probably, I mean, you might get injured, you might tear up the car, but you can see a wheel and you'll figure it out if you have enough time. If I give you a manual, you'll do it better. Yeah, that is, if I give you a way to think about this problem, if if you have analogous experiences, like maybe as a kid you played with the toy car, at least you know what the wheels were, you'll have a better shot. But if I give you a mentor, you can at least know that your not knowing is normal. It's hard enough to not know, but when you realize that not knowing belongs to being a creature,
Mhm.
you can tolerate not knowing. I like to say it's hard enough to be a sinner without getting punished for it. That and so yes, there are some things you can change.
Mhm.
And as a man of faith, I believe that there are some fundamental things about the world that Jesus taught. This business of surrender, which we romanticize like crazy, and then we
Yeah.
find out what they're really talking about.
Yes.
Well, the disciples never believed Jesus when he said he was going to die.
Mhm.
They said, "No, no, 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 not you. No, 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 no. That isn't what a real Messiah does. A
Right.
real Messiah fixes things." And he said, "No, no, no, no. That is not what real life is about."
Mhm.
And again, that becomes a way that we intentionally try to realize that there's always a line between what we wish we could do and what we can do. And even facing that line is the beginning of preparing for grief of all kinds. That's just the beginning of grieving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yes, you can prepare, but it means going through all the mini griefs that prepare you.
Mm.
And
Mm.
if you're determined to outwork everything, that's called denial.
Mm. One of the other things, since you mentioned the word denial, and we've talked about this quite a bit, it's, it's the things that one I was a well, there are the things that people say to me that that feel so insensitive. I don't normally get angry about that because I know that grief is awkward and uncomfortable for the people who care about you. They most times they don't know what to say, they don't know what to do.
Right, right.
And as you know, I've tried to help navigate my friends, telling them this is what I need, this is what I don't need. So I continue to do that. Uh, but the other thing that concerned me are people in my life that were close to Herman, and they seem to be in denial of sorts.
Mhm.
And my plea has been, don't try to go around this. You have to go through it, and because of not my expertise, but my experience,
Mhm, mhm,
what I'm learning, because I really don't know what to do.
mhm.
I just don't. I think accurate, probably the most accurate description is a feeling of lost, being
Yes,
lost. So
terrible.
when I speak about these things, I'm only speaking about what I'm experiencing and what you said earlier about it helps to know, it helps to know that it's okay if I don't know.
Yes. If you have to know, and I want you to know as much as you can. I want to know as much as I can. I spend lots of time thinking, but there's always a line beyond what I can know.
Yeah.
And we're back to living within our limitations. And when we have to live within our limitations, and we're used to always being told to work harder and be the best and all the secular ways of valuing human beings, it's hard to realize that those things just give you a better chance.
Yeah. They just give you a better chance.
And sometimes they don't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we could spend a long time talking about that line, the difference between the obligation to do all we can do and the belief that we can do anything if we try. If we go to the second, we call that hubris. If we do the first, we're fulfilling all that we are created to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And human beings cross that line all the time.
All the time. What you
And
said reminded me of the quote I asked you to repeat last week. You said the heart of grieving is learning to live within our limits.
mhm,
I
mhm.
mean, really, when you think about what we've been taught and what's been ingrained in us, y- it trying to figure out how do I do that? Does that mean accepting my helplessness?
Well, you may not do it gracefully, but it has to have that.
Yeah.
I mean, because you now have had an experience that even though you have woulda, coulda, shouldas, you could not manage. And it's the dramatic discovery of helplessness, but actually it occurs many other times. Many other
Yeah.
times. And uh, I just last night got a letter. our family is currently fracturing around the death of my father, and uh, there have there's a lot of bad blood. Without going into all the gory details, I get a letter from the sister-in-law of the brother. I mean, he's the brother's wife. He just went off the rails as far as I'm concerned. And I wanted to respond. And first of all, it troubled me because this is going to bring me into contact, it could, with somebody that I have joked and said I'll be happy to speak with him the next time at my funeral.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I mean, it was broken, but he's still my brother.
Yes.
So I have this desire to create a bridge and a desire to stay completely away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I spent a great deal of time crafting a letter in response to her. He hasn't written. And because I have this internal desire to do what I can. And even as I write it, and I shared it with some of my other siblings, that really stirred the primitive reactions to this man. And the current advice is don't you dare send that letter, Vernon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I felt an internal obligation, for good or bad, to respond in my best way. But I also saw that in the wider community, that may or may not be helpful. And if I'm going to, so I'm in the middle of a messy family conflict, and I do not know a way. And I just know that it's very painful, and I have to face that I don't care if I speak with the tongues of men and angels. Maybe nothing will happen, or maybe I could make it worse. So it's awful. And I have to, I have a couple of options. I could be, by God, I'll just keep rewriting this thing and I'll send the perfect letter. Oh, that would be nice to believe. I could abdicate completely. Uh, and I've tried both, but real life is lived in the middle.
Yeah.
And
Vernon, you just lost your father?
yeah, he died in December.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It had
I'm
been
sorry.
I mean, he was 100 years old. Uh, he lived too long. He was the last man standing, and there is no joy in being the last man standing. And his idea of what was supposed to happen uh, did not match what happened.
Mm.
And so he lived with us for a while. I mean, long history, but I have a lot of training, and most of it was not helpful
Yeah.
in my own family because I had to face what I couldn't do.
Helplessness.
Yep. For me, that's an absolutely key word. And I think it's because um, most of the people that I associate with have valued things like intellect and valued things like hard work. And this is how you get ahead. And all of that is true. But I really thought that it would guarantee the piece of candy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that especially with your background and expertise, you know this, but when you're going through grief,
And
you're in
now
the same boat as
it
all of us.
helps later. It helps later.
Yeah. Yeah.
It gives me a frame to refer to. But
Hmm.
so another story, I had a weird thing happen that they still medically don't know what happened. But within the course of a few hours, I went from feeling kind of flu-like symptoms to turning yellow. And I didn't even know I was turning yellow until I walked into a urgent care and they saw me and they said, go to the hospital. I was told that I was going to they that if I didn't improve within 2 days, they were going to send me to a transplant facility for my liver.
Mm.
And they asked me all the obvious questions, about drinking and hepatitis and Tylenol and all that stuff. And I didn't have any of the. And as I've now learned that this happens 1 or 2% of the time. It's idiopathic. Nobody knows why. My doctor said most people get better, the ones that don't die. So, I mean, I say this, that's all behind me, but that first night I told the doctor, I said, look, I'm a numbers guy. I need to know what these numbers are doing. And she called me when the numbers came in. And I so appreciated that. But that night, I'd sent my wife home because I'd had another medical time when sleeping in a hospital room was impossible. I said, I'm going to need you in the morning. And
Mhm.
I knew I was going to be up most of the night. So the feelings are just churning. And I'm thinking, what would help? What would help? Well, I know a lot of Bible, but I'm not a Bible verse guy. I depend on Google for that. And
Been my friend.
yeah. And then I thought, well, maybe music because I've
Hmm.
sung most of my life, and I thought maybe that would do it. Well, I went through a bunch of things. I did have my phone, thank God. And there's a piece of music, the Pia Jesu, that I dearly love. Our church sings it every Good Friday. And I found that. And even as I tell you this, I feel this happen. And I just burst into tears. And about that time, the nurse walks in. And I just said, she said, are you okay? And I'm okay. Just leave me alone for a minute. But after that,
Yeah.
I could go to sleep
Mhm.
because all of those feelings had to have some expression.
Yes.
Now, I didn't know that was what was going to give me peace,
Yes.
but that's the way out is through the bottom. And I have
Ye-
found that to be
Yeah.
true.
Let me pick your brain about that for a moment.
Huh?
I have found that tears help when I have those type of cries that you just described. I mean, those boohoo cries. I'm in my apartment by myself and, and all of that. Whenever, however long it takes, however many tissues I have to go through, there's something that's it's
Yes.
helpful at the end. I don't understand it.
You don't have to, but it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And if you can trust that that's where you are,
Hmm.
and you can trust that wherever you are is okay,
Yeah.
that's really trusting that God loves you, I might add.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you discover there's something on the other side.
Hmm.
Now,
Hmm.
holding on to that, the next time I get anxious, I promise you I will be tied up in a knot again.
Hmm.
But I do now at least have the idea,
Yeah.
suffer through it, Vernon.
Yeah.
Just tolerate being so anxious you can hardly move.
Yeah.
And it varies. Sometimes it's minutes, sometimes it's hours, sometimes it's days. This whole business with my family right now, writing it helped. It helped me discharge stuff.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure that's one of the values for you
Yeah.
of your letters and your
Yeah.
podcast
Yes.
because it helps wrap some words around what did not have words before.
So true. I was telling you the other day, I don't even understand why I started doing this,
Hmm.
especially almost immediately after Herman's passing. So what am I doing? And I don't know anything about doing. I did do a podcast of sorts of after during the pandemic, but it was not this kind
Hmm.
of a thing. And this has been a lot more involved, but I think I needed to a way to express.
Mm-hmm.
I needed, I need people to understand some things
Mm-hmm.
about grief because it didn't bring back my son, but the understanding helped me or is helping me
Yeah.
as I walk this out. And I'm thinking people don't understand. For example, my best friend from Ohio said to me last night that her daughter and her son found this picture of Herman when, because we've been knowing each other since before they were born. So they found a picture of Herman. He was just a small child. And the conversation was, don't show that to Alexis. Whatever
Oh,
you do, don't show that to Alexis. And because it'll make her sad, it'll make her cry. And I said to my girlfriend, who I love dearly, I said, I'm already sad. I'm already crying. Even if you don't see the tears, I'm crying. And I said, I want to talk about him. I want to talk about memories and they're gonna make me cry because he's no longer here. But just because you hide the pictures or or don't mention his name, don't say his name, it doesn't make this any easier. In fact, it makes me feel good. It makes me happy that you remember him too, that he meant that to you too.
mm-hmm. Well, it celebrates a connection that cannot be destroyed.
Yeah.
And of course, that also reminds us that the connection is different than we had known. And
Hmm.
so that brings grief, but it also starts to teach what cannot be destroyed and what is eternal.
Yes. Yes. That cannot be destroyed.
No, it cannot. And that was a hell
Yeah.
of a surprise for the disciples after Jesus was killed.
Yeah.
And they,
For
they didn't
sure.
recognize what was going on either,
No.
over and
Yeah,
over and over
remember
again.
the confusion. What
Absolutely.
just happened here?
Right, right.
Oh
One
my
of my
goodness.
famous, my favorite of the resurrection stories is the road to Emmaus. And they were walking with a stranger for several miles. They sit down, and he suddenly becomes the host of this little meal. And all of a sudden, that reenactment of sharing allowed them to see, ah. And the minute they had that ah, he was gone. The physical being was gone, but he lives.
Wow. It's so appropriate to describe that scene now in this season
Yeah,
because we often miss the beautiful part of this season because we're just thinking about Easter.
yeah,
But what a beautiful story. When I lost my son, I actually thought about how did Mary feel?
mm,
She saw him dying on a cross.
mhm.
What I can't imagine what did she look like? What was she feeling? What did she think? And you're talking about helplessness.
That's it. You don't
She
get any
could
more
not
helpless.
go up there and say, take these nails out of his hands and feet and bring him down immediately.
Right, right. And she couldn't do anything to save her son.
She watched him die
And she watched him die painfully.
painfully, cruelly.
Mm.
Her son.
And I love the title of this podcast because for the last 12 years, I've run uh, groups on what I call faith in real life. you know, and faith in real life says that you know more about Mary now than you ever did before.
Yes. My relationship with Mary has changed.
Sure.
It's more
It-
intimate.
which, I mean, who would want it this way? But it's absolutely true
Yeah.
that your connection with Mary has changed because you connected with her loss.
Mhm.
And the connection is what counts.
Yes.
And that's a faith claim that life is about meeting people across the table
Yeah. Meeting people
where
across the
they
table.
are, which is the promise that we have.
Yeah.
And, the people were really disappointed. They did not like this.
Yes.
We wanted somebody who was going to fix things, but,
Yeah.
Rome still destroyed the temple just a few years later. There was nothing that Jesus did that fixed any of those big problems,
Yes.
but he taught a new way to think about what it means
Mhm.
to have life and what you can keep,
Yeah.
and what will last beyond the memory of your name.
Such a powerful lesson about life that we learn through loss.
And I don't think there's another way to learn
In other words, no other way to learn it.
that viscerally. I mean, my head can crank it out,
Yeah.
but
Absolutely.
no. And I like to say the Bible was not written for theologians. It was written for people who needed to be loved.
Mhm. And we need to be loved, especially through grief.
And that was the ultimate promise that we were given. I'll be
Yeah.
with you anywhere.
Yeah. And always. I will never leave you.
I
I
will never
will
leave you.
never forsake you, even through grief.
And the feelings are wide open in me, and I have a way to cope with it that I love to say that throws people off. I said, it makes me want to be a Christian.
Me too.
There you go.
You. I get that, Vernon. I want to be a Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll make that choice today. Yeah, that sounds very appealing to me today. Well, before I close our time, and I could talk to you forever, I want to at least share with our audience a couple more of your quotes
Okay.
so they can think about it. You can comment or not, it's up to you. Here's one quote. Your grief is fresh and raw. Sharing it, even when the words make the feeling sharper, is the only way I know that actually helps people endure.
Hmm.
Sharing it, even when the words make the feeling sharper, is the only way I know that actually helps people endure. And then you said, I don't know where I heard this one. Maybe it was something you sent me, but it said, it takes a year of anniversaries. If you stay with your feelings to get through the worst of grief, even then it can jump up and bite you when you least expect. Oh my goodness. I talk about the time I'm walking through Walmart and all of a sudden, I'm looking, big store, all this crazy, and I'm going to get whatever I'm going to get. And all of a sudden I'm in tears.
Yeah.
Or I was at Decatur Presbyterian. Um, because this particular Sunday, I just wanted to walk across the street and go to church.
Hmm.
And I sat there and the choir, every church has a different culture.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Usually in the typical black church, it's, you know,
Right. Oh, yeah. 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 Yeah.
we got
Right.
the
Right. We're
gospel
very
music,
formal
it's
church.
hard.
Yes.
And, there's some softness there, but we go hard in the paint, as they say. And then in Decatur Presbyterian is just really soft and sweet and reflective, but the style of music is classical.
Yes.
So the choir was singing this beautiful song. And what language was it, Vernon?
A German.
It was German. And all I saw was Herman up there playing because Herman played classical music. And he would be on that stage with your choir
Mhm.
playing his viola. And I saw him doing that.
Yep.
And I just began to weep.
Yes.
And now this is my first time in church. So,
Right.
and I was sitting on this pew by myself and I got the tissue out and I was like, I didn't want
Yep.
anybody to see all these tears. I could not stop the tears from flowing. I could not.
Well,
So, so I think about that. And you know from our conversations that I want to share and I want people to share with me. And and I didn't do it because I knew this, that it's the only way that will help me to endure. It was some inner need that I had to say, let's not talk about it. No, I want to talk about it. I want you, will you, can you hear my pain? Will you listen to my pain and
yeah,
my loneliness and my anger? And can you let that be okay? Can you not try to stop me from crying?
right.
Just hand me a tissue. That's all you have to do.
And you actually have to teach people that
Yeah,
because most folks have no clue. And to get mad because they don't know is just to isolate yourself. But if you can say, I'm okay, this is just painful,
yeah,
just stay with me.
yeah,
I'll be on the other side of this in a bit. And you will. It's
yeah,
amazing how fast they flow through and then you can talk.
yeah. I like that.
Mhm.
I'm okay. Just stay with me.
Mhm. This is just painful.
It's just painful. It's just pain.
Mhm.
I'll be okay. Yeah.
Now, I've got to say one thing here, and I know we're very long, but I had a therapist once tell me, Vernon, it's only pain. I said, well, hell, I don't like it.
At all. Not at all. It hurts.
It does.
Why does pain hurt?
Well, we go. God has never taken my advice on such matters.
No.
But because it hurts, we call pain bad,
Mm-hmm.
which is the knowledge of good and evil, which kills. Pain is part of life. I'm not saying go seek it, but don't act like a virgin.
Yeah.
And if it is hard enough to go through pain without treating it as bad, it is hard. That's different category. And that's something that can help people grieve. That can be taught, even though people don't understand it until they're in the middle of it.
I think that's probably one of the most valuable lessons that we can leave our audience with, Vernon, because we do think of pain as being bad or evil or something to completely, at all costs, avoid.
Yep.
And we can't avoid pain.
Yep. And that's what Jesus tried to show us.
Yeah, that's what Jesus tried to show us. Yeah. Thank you for taking this time to talk with me, with all of us this morning. This was incredibly rich, as I knew it would be. Your wealth of knowledge, and you speak from your heart, even in you carefully listen when we're in group, and then I wait for you to speak. I mean, I listen patiently to what all of us have to say, and you sit there kind of like this, and then you speak, and it's like, okay, let me get my paper out. Gotta remember this. So thank you for sharing your expertise, for your heart and your gift with me, but with so many.
Well, thank you. And the experience of the conversation I find touching. And that's where I find life.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thanks to my audience for listening. I know you've gained something valuable from this conversation, and we'll see you next time on Get Real with Alexis. See you next time.
Bye bye.